related to how to finance your studies in the United States. So, welcome, Stene.
There we go. All right, thanks so much for organizing this, Elizabeth. It's great to join all of you, kind of scattered throughout Mexico and beyond. I see a few familiar names in the chat room, so that's always very good. So, as Elizabeth said, I'm Stene Verhulst. I'm at Colorado State University, where I serve in the Office of Admissions and help oversee our pathway admissions and direct admissions teams here at CSU. And in particular, I work mainly with an undergraduate audience. However, in this presentation, I'll try to give a few tips to students at the graduate level as well. So we'll kind of jump right in here. So kind of what you signed up for and what we're going to talk about today, we'll look at financial resources in the USA. And I look at this from a lot of different angles whenever I'm advising students. And so, ultimately, all of these things, we're not losing sight of what's the best fit for the student, but certainly a little bit of a walk through cost of living, some different aid opportunities, the types of scholarships we typically see here in the USA, what are some of the opportunities for grants, loans, working on campus, assistantships, particularly for those graduate students, and then kind of always encouraging students to think creatively, and hopefully a few tips for advisors on how to get the best financial fit for your students. And then at the end, of course, more than happy to take on some questions in this very, very important area for many of the students that you're working with, and certainly that we're working with as well. So I always like to start off here, and so I think students, whether they have a romantic idea of really where I live because of X, Y, or Z, I try to walk them through the U.S. being a very big country, and as you travel throughout the U.S., I'm sure as many of you have visited the U.S., you'll find that the cost of goods and incomes and cost of living, it varies significantly. And so this is really interesting. This was put out just this last summer in July. So they'll put out a new one. This is the Tax Foundation. So every July they run a report on how far $100 goes as you travel throughout the USA. So if I have $100 and I'm in one of these pink states you see, the cost of living is very affordable, and so your money actually goes much further than it would in other states. Whereas if I'm in a yellow state, you can see that the cost of living is really a little bit more cost prohibitive in terms of the cost of goods are so high that the income doesn't necessarily make that up. So again, just getting your students to think more about just what's the tuition, what's the cost. It's also, they have to live and eat in these places. And so throughout this chart, the most expensive place to live in the U.S. As of this last summer was Washington, D.C., where the equivalent of $100 was only worth approximately $85. And the most affordable place to live in the U.S. was actually Mississippi, where you almost got 15% more for every dollar that you had. So again, just kind of serves it as a benchmark to inform students about, hey, at the end of the day, it's going to be very affordable to live in this place as opposed to that place. So I think that goes a long ways in kind of understanding financial fit as well. So then the next step is to begin to look institutional type. And so you have students all the time that you're working with where you're thinking about, do they give need-based aid, or is this something that I can get? And we've kind of got the three areas here: need blind, need aware, and no need-based considerations. These are probably terms you're really familiar with. So need blind, these are schools, that they're going to consider those students regardless of the financial situation, because they may have the ability to meet their full need. Need aware institutions are a little bit more conscious in terms of, not their whole admitted class. They're going to have the ability to cut those costs. And so you'll find a few of these types of institutions. and then no need-based considerations. And in large part, I think as you move through this chart, kind of more or less, it's not always necessarily a hard and fast rule, but the no need-based considerations in many cases are going to be kind of the large public institutions like Colorado State. So unfortunately, we have a lot of students that demonstrate financial need, and we're happy, to admit those students, but at the end of the day, we're not able to necessarily yield a lot of those students because we can't come up and we can't meet that gap of funding with any type of scholarships or funding that we have. So kind of give you an idea, need blind, certainly going to be some of those more small private schools. One that comes to mind that I travel with a lot is something like Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. He's going to be able to take a chance and meet some of those needs if it's a student he really wants. That they're going to go ahead and get that student. So kind of gives you an idea of where some students may fit in. And I know if you're working a lot with like your competitive college club students or something, or opportunity fund students in particular, you're going to be looking at those places that can really come up with big financial need. And I'd be happy to help you try to identify them as well. All right, so this is more something that every institution gets to work with is scholarship opportunities. And so we know these scholarships come in from a lot of different angles, and so kind of focusing on the ones that we most commonly see. So we see a lot of merit-based aid in the USA, and so this could be that specific institutions, and each institution is going to do it different, of course, but we might be rewarding students academically based on just their grades. If that's in a national system or an international system, we might be rewarding students based on standardized test scores. So most commonly this is an ACT or an SAT score. Oftentimes we see that we look at a combination of both. So we're going to look at the grades that the student has in their home country, as well as what they've been able to do on the SAT. And so this is kind of like a matrix evaluation where we're looking at both of those factors, and that's how we do it at Colorado State University. So we would look at both the students' grades and their SATs. If one is stronger than the other, they can kind of balance each other out. So the students still may qualify for some merit-based funding there. And then curriculum, and kind of looking at that potentially as a very explicit scholarship in terms of if the student has 32 points on their IB, will automatically qualify them for a $6,000 scholarship or something like that. And then you can also think of many of you, I'm sure, already do in terms of just the AP, IB, Cambridge curriculums. Those are kind of a scholarship in terms of themselves, because they're going to be able to give that student advanced placement or university credit, which is equivalent of a scholarship in many cases as well. So that's kind of the merit-based thing. You don't see a lot of merit-based aid tied to English proficiency. However, I have seen some universities that will reward students if they have strong IELTS or TOEFL scores. They'll give them a scholarship to get them into their classroom right away. It's something that some institutions find very attractive if they don't have an ESL or an academic English program. The next big category is talent-based scholarships. So a lot of these at our universities are focused on athletics, and so working with international athletes to attract them to our universities to play competitively for us. Stuff in the arts, so you'll find that as your students are turning in portfolios, especially places like SCAD or Full Sail, stuff like that. Certainly a talent that they're looking for. And then in music, and this can be across the board. I've seen big universities and small universities alike be very competitive with music scholarships for your students. The next category I think that's really worth looking into is institutional scholarship opportunities. And these could be a few different factors. And so some institutions have a real motivation to offer diversity-based scholarships. And so this could be underrepresentation from a certain country or a certain region of the world. And the merit's there for the student. Maybe they're missing one or two components. But at the end of the day, they're doing something right. And we want to celebrate their diversity on our campus. And as part of that kind of trade-off, we want those students to bring cultural competence to our campus, and in exchange for kind of that service to the university, we want to help them out financially with some scholarship opportunities. So those are really creative options, and maybe something that you could bring up with some of the universities that you're working with. The next ones are simply holistic review. So again, kind of in that same vein, maybe the student's GPA is just a little bit less than what they would need to qualify for an automatic merit-based scholarship, but there's a reason in there. Maybe the student is sick or something's going on that maybe caused some of those grades to be compromised, and we certainly, I'll speak for Colorado State University, are going to take that into consideration, and we might be able to help that student out with some kind of holistic review scholarships. So we get together with the committee, and we're going to talk about a student that's maybe coming from Mexico, that the family was displaced at a certain point, or mom and dad took on opportunities maybe here in the USA, and so we really look at a lot of that context and are going to try to help out some of those students that really have a great will to succeed. And then departmental scholarships, and so of course students, kind of, you're looking at the institution as a whole and what the Office of Admissions can do, or the International Office, in terms of scholarships. And then kind of that next level is mechanical engineering really wants this student because they have a 750 on their math in the SAT. Now that's another source of funding for your students to begin to explore. So the caveat of all of this, of course, is in the US we're fiercely independent, so very decentralized education. Each institution makes their own decision on processes and deadlines. So as advisors or as students, it can be really tough to try to figure out, okay, so this deadline's March 1st for an engineering scholarship. They've got a diversity-based scholarship that ends on May 1st, and their merit-based scholarship ends on June 1st. So really kind of have to almost make a calendar to make sure that you're aligning yourselves to be eligible for the most opportunities as possible. And then the next layer here is organizational scholarships. So maybe your students are involved in a big student organization, even like something like club soccer. We have small scholarships for our club soccer players. So different things like that, or Greek and fraternity life, sometimes they'll have specific scholarships. One that always comes to mind is for transfer students, the Phi Theta Kappa scholarship, kind of the equivalent of National Honor Society. That would be a great organization. National Honor Society for first-year freshmen, the Phi Theta Kappa for transfer students. So there's a lot of those types of organizational scholarships within an institution, internal to our institution. And then externally, you're probably aware of some of the opportunities that exist in your community, your country, or your region, in terms of we've seen students that get Catholic scholarships from their local church. We've seen students, of course, get a lot of humanitarian scholarships throughout the world, in terms of if there's a specific mission with Fulbright or other things like that. Certainly an option. And then regional initiatives, and one that I think has been really significant in South Central America is the Association of American States. And so we're starting to see some of those students be attracted to our institution through some of the external organizations that we begin to collaborate with. So just some kind of broad ideas on the different types of scholarship opportunities that I've seen a fair amount of, and how hopefully your students can begin to close the distance on some of these opportunities that exist. So kind of touching on financial options, and this one's certainly a lot more tricky than the other two in terms of facing direct need and direct scholarship opportunities. Financial options here get a little bit tricky, especially for international students, and so they are worth mentioning, but can of course be very difficult to obtain. So we have loans, and so just to be clear, this is lended money with an obligation to repay. And as an international student, you certainly need a U.S. citizen or resident to help you co-sign on that. It's kind of amazing in many regards how often international students actually find a U.S. citizen or co-signer to make that a possibility. I worked at a much smaller institution previous to Colorado State University, and we had some really great stories in terms of host families or people within the community making sure that international students that maybe had visited in high school and have now wanted to come back to the region to get their degree. A lot of really cool relationships that allow these students to kind of co-sign on loans and make things happen. And this is typically an option once you're in the USA. I'm sure many of you know your country context much better than I, but it may be very difficult to get a student visa if your intent is to have an American co-sign loan before you leave the country. So we've really seen this as something that's more a viable means to maintain your studies once an international student is here. But again, all different types of relationships or arrangements that we've seen. And then grants. Grants are fantastic. So this is money given without a need to repay. Typically this is tied to research or specific government focus. And so again, you might see Fulbright grants, you might see research grants, certainly at the graduate level if you have students that are working with big companies. And so definitely something to be mindful of. And if we have any big grants, of which we receive a lot of here at Colorado State with our focus on research, international students absolutely might be able to benefit from some of the big money we're getting for research opportunities. And so kind of a couple of options that are beyond the merit and the need that may work out for your students. All right, so making money. All right, so an aptly named slide here about different opportunities to help kind of not pay for all of your school in many cases, but to help kind of make your time more comfortable here in the USA. And so kind of breaking it down. So you're working, and you can work on campus. There's also CPT and OPT. So on campus, 20 hours per week as an F1 student, which is typically the type of visa most of our international students have in terms of degree-seeking enrollment, and various opportunities on campus. And so the size of the campus, of course, is going to change some of those opportunities, but when you're talking about a place like Colorado State University, where we have 30,000 students on our campus, it's almost a self-sustaining city. And so really going to be options for on-campus employment in a variety of different capacities. Some small institutions will actually guarantee on-campus work for their students as kind of their package, and so that might be something that you could potentially leverage for as well. So CPT is off-campus work authorization also as an F1 student. This can be paid for CPT authorization. You are going for a paid opportunity, and it's curriculum based. So the C in there is curricular practical training, and it must be an integral part of your curriculum. And so some schools are going to have a different interpretation of this, and so it's federal guidelines, but you're going to have some schools that are really feeling like it needs to be explicit that in your second semester of your junior year, you need an internship with a business within our community or our state, okay? If it's that explicit, CPT is kind of implied with that program, but many times some students are going to approach and say, hey, I can do an internship as part of my degree. Can I do it off campus with a private business? And depending on the interpretation of that school official, that answer can be yes or no. I'll say from my previous institution, that interpretation that we had was very rigid, and so it needed to be explicit in the syllabi for that student to be authorized for CPT. Otherwise, we weren't that interested in authorizing those types of opportunities. We would encourage those students instead to do internships, other opportunities that would be unpaid off campus. OPT is occupational practical training. This is typically done post-degree. Needs to again be related to the major. So again, if somebody's doing engineering, needs to be focused in that capacity. We use OPT very creatively. So for example, student that studied communication has an opportunity to do OPT. I will absolutely look into hiring that student for a year to help us out with recruitment strategies, because communication, recruitment of international students or admission of international students, we can argue that is very related to their major. And so there's lots of opportunities for OPT. a much less rigid interpretation of curriculum and other things like that. The student's completely done, in most cases, with their degree and heading out into the workforce. And that is typically 1 year in the liberal arts, and we've seen it up to, I think now they're at 27 months for students in STEM designated fields. So kind of a wide spectrum for opportunities for your international students or any international students to be on their visa I-20 that's held by the university and be out in the workforce. So a really cool way, I think a very attractive way to bring students to the U.S. and talk about the real experience that they're going to get. Another thing about OPT is it can be used multiple times. So this is really great. So we've had students that do an associate's degree. They've completed a degree level, so they've gone here for 2 years. They've spent a year doing OPT, they've come back for 2 years, got their bachelor's degree, done another year of OPT, gone on to get their master's degree, and another year of OPT. So you can see the huge benefits of this for a student. Yeah, it extends their time in the US, of course, but relevant experience along the way and a great opportunity to kind of help fund and plan their next step. So assistantships, typically at the graduate level, and they could be focused on a few different things. So most commonly we see assistantships associated with research or teaching. So our expectation is the student really becomes kind of an employee for the university and gives back, typically helping out with undergraduate students in the teaching capacity or in the research capacity. Again, maybe working on one of those big federal grants we have to do kind of like world-class research with mosquitoes or deforestation or some of the big things that we do at CSU. We see a lot of students that get assistantships that are focused on research, and then a fair amount of assistantships that are also departmental. And so in our Division of Student Affairs, we have assistantships set up for students to get kind of that hands-on experience about what it's going to be like to be kind of active within the student affairs discipline at a university or within the international office. Graduate assistantship, helping with study abroad planning and advising undergraduate students that are getting ready to go abroad. So you kind of got those three different veins for assistantships, and the benefits tied to assistantships are typically quite lucrative for students. And so many of these assistantships are full tuition with a living stipend as well. So we'll typically see like $1,500 monthly allowance for food and rent, those types of things, and no tuition at all for that student. And then of course just tremendous experience for graduate students if they're able to get an assistantship. So I think these are some of the big ways. I'm sure you have all seen a lot of different ideas or heard different ideas, but these are some of the big mediums by which we've seen our students be able to kind of, again, not necessarily finance all of their studies, but certainly by thinking creatively about work opportunities to help pay the grocery bills and potentially the rent. All right, so financial tips. Probably some of this you've gathered throughout the presentation already, but stacking. So in particular, when we look again at that scholarship page, and you see there's talent-based scholarships, there's academic scholarships, there's organizational scholarships, there might be diversity-based scholarships. Certainly try to encourage everybody to think as creatively as possible about combining as many of those resources, and we call that stacking them together. And so $8,000 from a diversity-based initiative on a campus, $4,000 for a music scholarship, that's $12,000 right there. And then maybe they get a National Honor Society scholarship for another $1,000 or $2,000. So I think there's great opportunities to combine scholarships. Not all scholarships do combine, but in many cases this is applicable, and it's fantastic opportunity. 2+2. So we're seeing more and more international students, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this as well, that are starting out at community colleges in order to save costs and maybe build their English proficiency, and also get on their path to a 4-year degree, and they'll save a lot of money potentially in those first 2 years, and then come on to a university to get their bachelor's degree in their final 2 years. And so I think that can be a great way to save financially, and specifically for some of those students that say no, I need to be in Los Angeles, California. Maybe say, hey, we're going to get you to Los Angeles, California, but for the first 2 years, why don't you go to a community college in Utah and save some money, kind of experience a different atmosphere, and then after that, you know, they've got an articulated agreement already with the university. And so 2 plus 2s can always have a little bit of risk in terms of transferring credit and making sure that they're going to stay on track to hopefully get their degree in 4 years. But many of our institutions have strategic partnerships with community colleges where we already can guarantee that those credits are going to transfer to our universities, and in addition, maybe some scholarship opportunities, since we really have a formalized agreement with one of those community colleges. So it could be a good way to save some money. Off-campus living, and so this is kind of really after the first year. Many universities are going to have a first-year residency requirement, but if they don't, off-campus living is a great option. Even in the first year, I wouldn't highly recommend that. I think the first-year residential experience is really important to help build friends and different competencies. But certainly after the first year, most of our students do move off campus with their roommates and share costs of living and different things like that. So it's a great way to save some money. If students do want to live on campus, which is fantastic, some great opportunities to cut some of their costs in terms of making sure they have a roommate, and then looking at their meal plans really seriously. And so, you know, do they need an unlimited meal plan every week? Probably not. Do they have the ability to kind of just eat a light breakfast or light lunch, whatever they want to do? Then they can begin to see how they can reduce their meal plan and really, in many cases, save thousands of dollars a year by not eating every meal on the campus or in the campus cafeteria. Host families, and so this is something I alluded to a little bit earlier, but increasingly we're seeing initiatives to kind of sponsor students, sponsor a RAM here at CSU, call for host families, and I think it's a really cool way for even degree-seeking students to get immersed here in our community and on our campus. And so, especially smaller schools, there's some really cool opportunities. We did this a lot in my previous time in Kansas, where we had host families that said, absolutely, we would love to host this student for a semester or for a year to help them get on their way, and you'd see those relationships really grow. If students can't come here for the completion of a full degree, you know, of course, short-term exchanges are fantastic, and so we have a visiting international student program. They can come and spend a semester with us or a year with us, a great opportunity to build that resume and come and experience things in the USA. And then another financial tips I think a lot of international students fail to think about is, can I walk and ride my bike everywhere, or do I need to buy a car? And so we really pride ourselves in Colorado on being very fit communities, and so as part of that, we make sure that our students can bike or walk anywhere they need to go. And so with very explicit biking, walking, car lanes throughout our campus and our community to make sure that we don't need to put that cost on an international student or their family. We're very confident in the fact that it's going to be, you know, safe and accessible. And so that's a huge cost savings or cost consequence potentially for many students. So that kind of wraps up a lot of what I'm talking about in terms of affordability or finances, and then just wanted to introduce you a little bit more to Colorado State University. So kind of like I alluded to, it's 30,000 students here, so kind of a big city within the city. There's about 150,000 people that live here in Fort Collins. A lot of sunshine. We think it's a fantastic place to live. That's a picture of a hike that's not too far away. That's in Estes Park, which is part of Rocky Mountain National Park. And then in the bottom, you see a picture of our campus. So we're really kind of proud of our green initiatives through our academic offerings and our commitment to the environment. So again, lots of sunshine. Here's where Colorado is, nestled right in the Rocky Mountains. Fort Collins, you can see, is just an hour north of Denver International Airport. So it's really simple for students to get in and out. Denver has a lot of fantastic connections, especially to Mexico. And then kind of that biking thing, and so as part of our commitment to fitness and accessibility, we've been designated a platinum biking community, which just means that everywhere you go, you're going to see bikes and you're going to see explicit trails to keep our bikers safe. And then, of course, within a 20-minute drive from Fort Collins, you're in a national forest, and within an hour, you're within a national park. And so I really love it. I'm drawn to Colorado because of some of these outdoor recreational opportunities. And if you have students that are looking for fresh air and very active mindsets, CSU or Colorado in particular might be a great fit. This is a breakdown of our colleges. So we have 8 colleges here at the university, and so kind of most popular among many of our international students are business and engineering. We also do a lot of stuff in the natural sciences. Very big veterinary program here with a focus on the biomedical sciences as well. Our biomedical sciences program is arguably our most competitive program at CSU for undergraduate students, so very, very competitive, lots of applications. Do a lot of stuff in the agricultural sciences, so we're a land-grant institution, which means that we have a federal kind of imperative to make sure that we're getting students outside, we're giving them access to education that they otherwise wouldn't. College of Health and Human Sciences, still a nice focus on the liberal arts here, and then again, natural resources complementing a lot of what we're doing in the natural sciences as well. So that's kind of our colleges breakdown. This is the scary slide. Kind of a breakdown of costs. So we're right at around $40,000 to $42,000 per year. That's pretty consistent across undergraduate and graduate. And so kind of you're all thinking that the scholarship conversation is really important now. And that's certainly our goal, is to try to drive down the tuition costs for our students, in particular our international students at CSU. We cannot do very much to help with kind of living and personal expenses, books and supplies, but we'll certainly, at least I can speak very candidly for my team in this office, we're going to try our best to make the tuition as attractive as possible. And sometimes it's very difficult, and I've had a lot of conversations with students that just say, you know, it's simply too expensive. But we're here to help, and then also I've included the link there for our student financial services team. So if you just type in that website, you'll be able to look at kind of all of the different non-resident scholarship opportunities. And to be very clear, my office is looking at academics for admission and academics for scholarships. And then we have our student financial services team, which is looking out for students in terms of organizational scholarships, departmental scholarships, and so kind of keeping students balanced between both. So kind of very distinct roles. Again, just with the structure of our university, that's going to be different everywhere that your students are looking. And then just kind of a simple, there's really no tricks to our application process. This is specific to undergraduate students. Of course, graduate students are going to want a little bit more. We highly encourage the SAT, but we don't require the SAT for admission for our international students. So that's kind of what we expect to see within an application here for students at CSU. So I think at this point, I'm ready and happy to take on any questions and help students navigate their way through a lot of these financial peaks and valleys. As we get to this point in the year, we're seeing a lot of questions about is that the most money that you can give us, or is that the best scholarship available, or if I send you this, does that change anything? And so it's that time of year where we're making really difficult scholarship decisions. A lot of that stuff's in our control, probably more of it's out of our control, but ultimately it's our hope that some of these tips help guide that conversation in an attractive way to make sure that the student academically is in the best fit, but also that they can afford to not only come, but to stay. You know, that's all of our goal, is to make sure that these students are going to get a degree from the U.S., something they can be proud of, and afford it, and really, you know, create a better opportunity for them and their future families. So that's it for my side in terms of some of the big things that I'm thinking about. And if I missed something, I'm happy to have that feedback. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to help with that.
Thank you, Stene, for this interesting presentation. Now, okay, we open this session for questions and answers. Guys, do you have any questions? Please type them.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me. So responding to RCC International's question, so I think absolutely. I think it's a confluence of both factors. In most cases, coaches will find really dominant athletes, and especially for international athletes, they're typically going to be looking, depending on the level again, but certainly, so we're a Division I institution, so the highest level of athletics. And so if your students are competing at the national level, that's probably going to get our coaches' attention. But if your students are very competitive and are doing very well on a local or city basis, they're probably going to be more likely to be able to get the attention of like a Division II NCAA school or maybe an NAIA school. So it's kind of hard to answer that question, very concretely. But I think, yes, it is a two-way street. Many times our coaches will find your students, and many times your students will find our coaches. And I would say that there's a lot less barriers for students to contact coaches than there are for coaches to contact students. And so coaches can only contact student athletes at certain times in the year and based on their level of study. Whereas students, your students can always send an email to the coach. And so there's kind of a lot of rules and regulations regarding student-athlete conduct with coaches. But I think absolutely, if you have a very successful athletic department, have the students make a very good video. That's really important, so that they can demonstrate, their kind of intangibles to the coaches. Post that to YouTube. Address a few coaches specifically. Don't send out a mass email, but say, hey, I was all-state for my soccer team at right defensive back, and I'm really interested in your institution, and here's a link to my video. So I think it works both ways. Okay, so is the federal Pell Grant your financial aid, or is it a whole different thing? So the term financial aid can be a little bit confusing. But for the most part, if we're speaking a lot about financial aid, that is specific to U.S. citizens. Financial services or scholarships or funding opportunities are more specific to kind of international students. It's kind of a linguistic deal. But a federal Pell Grant for a U.S. citizen would be part of a financial aid package. So once they applied and completed the FAFSA and identified Colorado State University as their school of choice, our financial services team, as part of the financial package, would tell that student if they are Pell Grant eligible, and it would be part of their award letter, again, if they are a U.S. citizen. So I hope that makes it very clear. It'd be communication that ultimately comes from our office about a student being Pell Grant eligible. And it would be it might say first line, Pell Grant eligible, second line, Stafford loan, third line, funding gap, parent subsidized loan, etc., the different opportunities. So hopefully that helps with that one. All right, so moving on to Oliver here. So it depends. So looking at financial aid after being accepted or during the application process, and what is the maximum of percentage they can get. And so that kind of goes back to need blind, need aware, and no need-based considerations. So if we look at this slide again, a school that's need blind may not even ask about finances. It may not even be a huge part of the conversation because they want to consider the students based specifically on merit, and if they want that student, they can meet their full need. And so you're going to see some of these schools that can get 100%. And so some of these schools, 100%, they can meet all of the financial need. Some of these schools that are more need aware can maybe meet them in the middle, so 30, 50%. So you're kind of, it'll be kind of a mix of different packages. And so in our case, so no need-based considerations at Colorado State, you would need to be admitted before we consider you for any of our scholarships. So those, because we don't have need-based scholarships, but just in terms of timeline, they'd need to apply, be admitted, then we would tell them about their scholarship opportunities and qualifications, whereas need blind, need aware schools would do it a little bit differently. So hopefully that helps answer your question. All right, so I don't know if there's any other questions, or if you have. Elizabeth, did I miss anything? Maria will certainly tell me if I missed anything. But yeah, hopefully you found the information useful. It's all going to be situational. It's all going to depend on each different school and their processes. This is kind of just in broad strokes what my experiences have been like in terms of advising and helping international students fund their studies. Every once in a while, we're able to really make magic happen, and that's always really exciting. But unfortunately, in many cases, you just can't quite get there with some of these students in terms of numbers and financial fit, but that's totally okay. We want to make sure that students are going to be able to, like I said, be able to get their degree and be really happy with their choice. Is there anything else that you wanted me to cover, Elizabeth, or any other last questions? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and hopefully we'll see you.
Thank you, Stene, for this interesting webinar, for this presentation. Thank you all for being here. Please feel free to contact Stene Verhulst in his email address, and well, I'll be in touch with you. I will give a follow-up to this presentation, so I already have your emails. So Stene, thank you very much again, and thank you guys, and see you very soon. Goodbye.
All right, absolutely. Thanks so much. All right, have a great day.